Hello everybody. In the last video we looked at how to use the CV curve tool to draw a French curve. In this video we'll look at just a bunch of miscellaneous techniques and tools regarding Nurbs curves that I didn't necessarily cover in the previous video. Okay, I'm going to switch over to the top viewport and I'm going to go to Create, CV curve tools, curve tools rather, CV curve tool, and I'm going to open up its tool settings. The default is set to 3 cubic, but I'm going to change it to 1 linear. And I'm also going to turn on snap to grid for this little exercise. That way I can use these points on the grid to place my control vertices and my edit points exactly where I want to place them. And I'm going to click once, twice, 3 times, 4, and 5, and enter. Now this curve here, if we take a look at it in the attribute editor, you will notice that it has 4 spans at 1 degree. And it's that 1 degree that gives us these sharp angles. Now the problem with this is that if I come in here and I move the control vertices, I cannot create nice curves. This is always going to be very sharp angles. Another thing I'd like you to take notice of is that when I come to this point, you'll notice that it is in fact not an enclosed form, or shape rather. It's not a closed shape. If I want it to be a closed shape, what I can do is go to Object Mode, Curves, Open, Close. Now it is a closed shape, and if I select the control vertices, you'll notice that it is a closed shape. In fact, you'll notice it now has 5 sides. I'm going to go back to the Create Curve Tool, CV Curve Tool, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say reset the tool. That'll set it back to its default of 3 cubic, and I'm going to click in the same exact points where I created this this square. So I'll click once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. And you'll notice that even though I clicked in the same exact spots and I used the same tool, when I have 3 degrees, I get this nice curve. In fact, if I press 3 on my keyboard, you'll see it in a more smooth form. Now, once again, if we go to its components, you'll notice that in fact it is not a closed form, even though the beginning and the end are right on top of one another. Once again, if I actually want to make this an enclosed curve, what I can do is go to Object Mode, Curves, Open, Close. You'll see that the shape changed a little bit. I'm going to select one of these control vertices, and you'll notice now I get a much smoother beginning and end of this curve because it's a closed shape now. Okay, let's take a look at a couple other concepts regarding Nurbs curves. I'm going to delete these two, and I'm going to create just a regular circle, Nurbs curve. I will go to its component mode and I will select edit points, and I'm going to select this edit point and this edit point. And I will go to Curves, Detach. Now you'll notice that I have two Nurbs Curves, and I'll just move this one off a little bit like that. So you can see that you can take one Nurbs curve and you can break it up into multiple Nurbs curves if you need to. Not only can we detach curves, we can also attach them. I'm going to select my two curves and I will go to Curves, Attach. Notice that I still have my two original curves, and now I have a third curve that is a combination of these two curves. And in fact, because I have history on them, if I move the original curves, my new curve will adjust accordingly. If I don't want this, I simply go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. I'm going to get rid of my original two curves here. So now I'm left with just this, this curve here. And I'm going to show you another fun little trick. So I'm going to turn off Snap to Grid, and I'm going to turn on Snap to Curves. I'm going to come to Create, Curve Tools, CD Curve Tool, and notice that if I'm near the curve here with my CD Curve Tool, and I press the left mouse button, it'll snap to the curve. That way I can easily snap to the end of the curve here, and then start drawing another Nurbs curve here. I'm going to complete this curve by pressing Enter. And now I have two curves. Again, if I select them and I go to Curves, Attach, I'll get a third curve that is the two curves attached to one another. I'm going to go ahead and delete these two. I don't need them anymore. And we'll take a look at this curve, this new curve that I've created here. Again, remember that if you want to enclose the shape, you can always do so by going to Curves, Open, Close. And now we have a closed shape here. Finally, to finish this video, let's take a look at a practical problem. I'm going to use Nurbs curves to create a heart shape, but I'm going to show you a couple different ways we could tackle this problem using some of the tools and techniques that I just showed you. So I'm going to delete this, and one way that I could create a heart would be to start with a circle. I'll then come to my components, Control Vertex, and I'll simply start moving the control vertices to create the shape that I want. Now to get the hard angle here, I'm going to take these two control vertices and I'm going to bring them closer together. And to get the harder angle down here at the bottom, to make it more pointy, I'll bring these two control vertices down and perhaps bring them in as well. And there's the heart. Now, what if I don't like the shape here that I'm getting? Well, of course, what I can do is go to Edit Points and perhaps add a little bit more, a few more edit points, a few more control vertices. So I'm going to select these three, and I will go to Curves, Insert Knot, and I'm going to do the between sections, which means that between these two edit points, it'll create a new edit point here, and it'll create another edit point between these two edit points. I will apply. And now go to Control Vertex, and I'll have a little bit more to work with to get the form that I want. And that is one way that I could create a more complicated shape, but starting with something as simple as a Nurbs circle. Now my pivot point right now is still at the origin while the heart is here. Of course, what I can do is I can either press the D key or insert key and move the pivot point where I want it, or I can simply go to Modify, Center Pivot. Let's take a look at yet another way that we could create a heart using Nurbs Curves. This time I'll go to Create, Curve Tools, CV Curve Tool. We'll make sure that it's set to 3 cubic, and I'm going to simply draw it. I'm going to turn off Snap to Curves and turn on Snap to Grid, and I will click here to start the heart. I'm going to turn off Snap to Grid now, and I'll just start drawing the heart. Once again, I'll turn on Snap to Grid so that I'm getting it right down the center here. And I'll click in the middle and press Enter. This time I'm creating just half of a heart. This will make it very easy to make the heart symmetrical later on if I work with just half of it. Start adjusting my control vertices. I'm going to press 3 on my keyboard as well to make this a little smoother. And that's a good beginning. I'll take this curve here, and I'm going to type Control D to duplicate it. And I will scale it -1 on the X. And now I have 2 curves making up a heart. I'm going to select my 2 curves, and I will go to Curves, Attach. And as you can see, we ended up with a little bit of a problem here. Let's just move this out of the way here. There are a couple different ways I could fix this. Actually, one way that I could fix it is with this curve selected, come over here to the inputs, and I'll just, on reverse 1, I'll turn it on, and that fixes the heart. Another way I could do that is select this curve here, and what I will do is reverse its direction. So I go to Curves, Reverse Direction. Now that affected this one because this one still has history on it, okay? But now, if I select these 2 curves and I attach them, I get a very nice heart. Now remember that these both have history on them still. So if I were to come in here and start adjusting one of these curves or the other curve, they'll both update as well because they have history on them. Sometimes this can be a good thing, sometimes it's undesired, in which case I'll simply select the geometry that I have here and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now, if I adjust this, it'll still update this one, which still has history, but it will not affect this one. So that's two different ways that you can create a more complicated shape such as a heart using Nurbs curves.